On my map, I'm currently showing the world street map imagery. I'm going to zoom out a little bit. And we're looking at the southern area of Eugene around the butte. And I'm going to turn on the aerial imagery here so we can get a little bit better idea of where we are. Oh, there's Fern Ridge. Okay, so here is Eugene. And let's see. What I want is Skinner's Butte. So I'm going to zoom into Skinner's Butte. That's where I want to be. So I have a LiDAR file that it's about 10 years old right now. And this is part of the Willamette Valley LiDAR series. And this is showing bare earth. So I'm going to go ahead and put that up here. And this is a digital elevation model, and so what it is showing is that low elevation is showing as a dark color, high elevation is showing as a light color, and that makes sense because I've got the butte here, which is my highest elevation right there. And if I use my ID tool, which right now I can't seem to find on my toolbar. Oh, for heaven's sakes, where did that puppy go? 1 second. Okay, I'm going to turn that off. Let's turn off some of these things. I don't need the classification bar. There it is. Okay, so I'm going to click the ID tool, and I'm just going to click one of these darker spots, and I get a pop-up information window, and it's telling me that the pixel value, it means the value of that grid cell, is 542. So because I know the area, I'm assuming that my data is in feet. Let's click right there. That's 488. I could double check this by putting on the topographic map as the base map. Let's see if we can do that. Oh good, they're going to make it really hard to see. I'm going to zoom in on that spot and turn this off and see if I can see any kind of elevation information here. I see contour lines. So there's something, and that says 700 feet. Okay, so that's 700 feet around there. So let's see what this is. Okay, so my data is in feet. This says 695 feet. If you zoom in on a LiDAR, or a DEM, I can see that it is little grid cells, and so I'm going to click on that grid cell, and there's the elevation for that grid cell. I'm going to click, this is lighter, so it should be higher. So I'm going to say this is 690, that one's 691. Cool. So each of these is a grid cell. If I open up the properties of my DEM, I'm going to get some really important information. It tells me the cell size, 3 by 3. So 3 by 3 what, one might ask. So let's look down in this data, and it is telling me here, feet. So this is 3 feet by 3 feet is the width of that cell. It's grid, which is another name for raster DEM. There are this many, 11,000 columns of data and 4,190 rows. So if I multiply that times the cell size, I could tell you how much area this covers. And if I wasn't sure I was measuring right or I knew the resolution, I could actually just use the measuring tool. Let's choose my units, and let's do feet because this said it's supposed to be in feet. And let's click on that. I should get 3 feet. I'm getting pretty close. So yeah, so each of those cells is actually 3 feet by 3 feet. So that helps me kind of understand my data. So the DEM is the absolute elevation information. I have a value of elevation that I can do a lot of analysis with that. From this, I'm going to derive a couple products. So I'm going to open up the ArcGIS toolbox, and you see I have already been in here. I'm going to open up the Spatial Analyst tool set, and then I'm going to choose the hillshade, and I'm going to double click hillshade to open the toolbox. And it's asking me to choose which raster I want to use to create my hillshade. So luckily I only have one here, so I'm going to go ahead and choose that. If I wanted to choose one that was not in my table of contents, I could go to the table, and here's a bunch of other rasters that I have. I wonder if I have one of the same. I don't. These are highest hit. Oh, maybe I do. Let's see, 4-3. Oh, I might add that later, but that's all right. Another day. All right, so that's the raster. Here's the important part for you. When you're going to have to create an output, because when I run my hillshade, it's going to create a new raster that has shading values so that I can create the look of elevation. This is going to default to my ArcGIS desktop, and it's going to call it HillShaB432. I need to make sure that's where I want it to go, and that's what I want to call it. And for me today, that is not what I want. I want to put this on my desktop, and I'm working in a file right now called Fugro, and I'm going to name this BE432432123H1 Hill. Okay, I'm just going to save it and call it that. Oh, it's too long. I can only have 13 characters. So wonder how many I have. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Ooh, so if I get rid of this, how about this? I'm going to do camel case HS for hillshade. Cool. All right, so now my warning went away. The azimuthal is the angle of the light. And I just don't understand enough about this. You can really make it look pretty bizarre by changing that. I'm going to leave that. The altitude is how high the sun is above the horizon. And the Z factor is how much vertical exaggeration do you want. And I'm going to keep this here at 1. So I'm leaving all those defaults. And then I'm going to choose OK. And I'm going to sometimes get a progress bar. I'm going to move, while that's progressing, I'm going to move my toolbox out of the way. It's completed. I have a datum conflict between the map and the output. That's okay with me because I started with a different map earlier today. And I'm going to go ahead and close that. I'm going to take my toolbox away. And what I have created is a hillshade, a raised relief, a shaded relief of this area. And this is using what's called bare earth. So when this DEM was created, buildings were extrapolated to be level with the landscape around it. So here we are with my DEM and my hillshade of that area. Okay, so I'm going to click these off a minute. Make sure I'm back where I want to be. Okay, I want to be right there. So if I if you look at your DEM or your hillshade, you'll notice that the values are from 0 to 255. These are color values. These have nothing to do with actual data elevation. Okay, so in order to create a nice looking hypsometric map of this area, I'm going to go to list by drawing order, and I'm going to take my DEM and put it above my hillshade, and then I'm going to symbolize my DEM. So I'm going to go in here and I'm going to pick one of these shaded colors. I'm going to do that. And let's see, I think, well, let's see, I can flip it later if I want. And I want to change my display, my transparency, so that the hillshade shows through. And I'm going to try 50% transparency. So there we go. Now, is that what I want? Do I want blue things? The high elevation is here in the low. No, I'm going to switch that around. So I'm going to go back to symbology and I'm going to invert that. Okay, I like that better. There we go. So now I have a hillshade that, an elevation model that shows the elevation of this region. But I've got that hypsometric coloring that helps identify that. So when I go to make my map and I insert my legend, I don't want the hillshade on there because the hillshade is going to have values. Well, let's just leave it for right now. Let's just say next, next. Oh, it's dying. Please don't die right now. Okay, so hold on. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and grab that. Nope, I'm not grabbing that. There we go. And if I zoom in to the full map, and let's look at 100% here. When I look at that legend, for most people, this means nothing, right? And this really has no value to information in my map. So I'm going to go back to my items and I'm going to send that back out. So it's still on my map data, but it's not in my legend. And then I need to change this so that it says elevation. And I can change, actually I should probably put feet here because that would be helpful. And then I don't really want the word value there because I find that's kind of useless. So I'm going to, a couple ways I can deal with that. One is just highlight it and hit delete and get rid of it that way. So I have elevation in feet, high and low. So that's pretty helpful. I'm going to go back, zoom to a layer. Oops, no, I'm not. I'm going to go back to data view. Okay. Now, zoom to layer. I'm going to go back to this layer. So I've got a nice hillshade that's helping me kind of visualize this. I'm going to go back to my toolbox, and in my surface tools, I could create contour intervals. I could also create a slope or aspect. So let's just do a slope real quick. And now I have two rasters, but the only one that's going to give me an accurate slope is this elevation. The hillshade will create a slope based on color, not on elevation. And it's going to be called, let's see, I want to make sure it's going in my same folder. Cool. And I'm going to this time just call this slope. Okay. And I'm going to keep, you can choose degree slope or percent rise, but I'm going to keep the default here as well. And slope has a pre-existing or predetermined classification. So there is my slope, which is not showing up at all. Interesting. There it is. It was just slow to show up. So this is showing my areas of the highest slope. That's showing the areas of the lowest slope. And what I will see if I go into my properties, it has the same size cell, the same number of rows and columns. It's got the same spatial information. What would happen then if I did the slope based on the hillshade? Let's just do that for grins and giggles, as somebody I know says. Okay, so I'm going to choose the wrong file, and I'm going to call this bad slope. These demos never work out right. Chances are it'll look exactly like the first one, and that'll be horrible. But anyway, yes, we know that. Okay. But look at my data values. Wow. So, oh yeah, thank you. So this slope is saying the percent slope is from 88 down to 0. But this is the actual slope. If we turn this on and off, actually I'm going to go ahead and turn that off too. And that off as well, just to make life a little easier. Okay. And then you can see how this is mostly just a lot of gibberish. And that actually correlates with some of those areas that we saw on our hillshade. So I'm going to go zoom into, let's just zoom into this area here. And it's saying that this is a high slope, and that's a high slope. This is an interesting little thing. Oh yeah. And so if I turn on my elevation and my hillshade and turn that off, you can see that little rise. So if I turn this one on, I can't see that slope at all. It's just a bunch of chatter. So when you derive your, when you use the surface to make your contours or do aspect or slope, you have to make sure that you are pulling your data from your absolute data layer, not from one of the derived data layers.